Hello everyone, welcome to the Outpost Game Centre here in the heart of Brussels. Rich Hagan alongside Brian David Marshall welcoming you to Friday Night Countdown, the day after Martin Dang of Denmark won Pro Tour Dragons of Tarkir.
Yeah, Dragons of Tarkir had a huge impact at this Pro Tour. It really shook up both the draft formats and the standard format that were on display this weekend.
Magic has always been a combination of flavour and mechanics, and at Pro Tour Dragons of Tarkir, well, the flavour was out of the park.
Absolutely, Rich. Just at this Pro Tour Top 8 alone, you had 4 Dragon Lord's commands, you had 4 Havens of the Spirit Dragon, you had 6 Ugin the Spirit Dragon, you had 19 cards that asked you to reveal a dragon, and 29 dragons. That is a new high water mark for dragons in the top 8 of a Pro Tour. The previous record was 17.
Now, of course, alongside all the dragons, we had some humans too. 6 of our top 8 were there for the first time, while 2 had significant second appearances on Sunday. Let's take a look. Seven countries and 5 archetypes were represented across the top 8. There were 2 high-level pros, a top finisher from Pro Tour Fate Reforged, a player who earned his invite through the Magic Online Championship Series, and 4 Pro Tour qualifier winners.
Noted control player Adrian Sullivan made it to his first Pro Tour Top 8 after a career of more than 20 years. And he brought a signature blue-black control with him to play. His quarterfinal opponent was Thomas Hendricks of the Netherlands, who was running Green Devotion. Sullivan's deck provided enough counterspells and removal early in the game to handle Hendricks' bevy of big creatures, and Hendricks fell to Sullivan's overwhelming end-of-game Ashiok Nightmare Weaver and Ugin the Spirit Dragon.
The quarterfinal matchup between Andre Straski and Andrew Olschwager featured the same overall archetypes, but showed off how deck builders have room to carve out their own niches within that space. Straski, making his second top 8 appearance this season at just 19 years of age, played a Green Devotion deck that used See the Unwritten to power out huge threats, including Dragon Lord Ataka. Olschwager had his own suite of dragons in his blue-black control deck. Straski manoeuvred through Olschwager's counterspells and removal to stick a decisive Nissa Worldwaker to take the match.
Speaking of blue-black control, meet Shadow Yasuoka, one of the world's foremost control players. A second Pro Tour Top 8 had eluded Yasuoka since his win at Pro Tour Charleston in 2006, despite numerous top 16 finish. That drought ended in Brussels. Facing the master control player in the quarterfinals was Jason Chung, who became the first player from New Zealand to make a Pro Tour Top 8. Chung's Red-Green Dragons deck boasted 8 dragons, along with Goblin Rabblemaster and Surrak the Hunt Caller. However, that wasn't enough against Yasuoka, who showed off the power of both versions of Selmgar to advance to the semifinals.
But that's enough of green-based aggro versus blue-black control. Martin Dang and Marco Camiluzzi brought different weapons to the top 8 party. Dang's incredibly fast red aggro deck wanted to race past the control decks before they had a chance to set up, while Camiluzzi opted for Arbzan control and the familiar Courser of Krufix and Siege Rhino ground game, backed up by Elspeth and plenty of removal. Dang's Goblin token makers, backed up with a green splash for Become Immense and Ataka's Command, were too fast for Camiluzzi to ever stabilise.
Dang continued his blistering pace through the top 8 when he met Sullivan in the semis. The red aggro deck had a pair of lightning strikes to win game 1, and then he showcased the power of Dash against blue-black sorcery speed removal as Zergo Bellstriker hit for the final 8 points over 4 turns, sending Dang into the finals.
Dragons came out to play in the semi-final match between Straski and Yasuoka. Game 1 was decided by a rapid-fire sequence that featured no fewer than 6 dragons played in a row by both players. An Icefall Regent by Yasuoka was removed from the sky by Dragon Lord Ataka, but then Dragon Lord Silumgar from Yasuoka stole Ataka from Straski. A second Dragon Lord Ataka killed Silumgar, leaving Straski with 1 Dragon Lord on his side, but a second Dragon Lord Silumgar took back the second Ataka, and a follow-up Silumgar the Drifting Death sealed the game for Yasuoka. The Elder Dragons continued to smile on Yasuoka, who used Dragon Lord Silumgar to swipe a Surak the Huntcaller and finish off Stratsky to advance to the finals.
And that's where Yasuoka and the Dragons came up just a little bit short. After splitting the first two games, Dang used a brutal combination of Monastery Swift Spear and Tarkir's command to punch through a lot of damage early to win Game 3. And not even the Token Hoser Virulent Plague out of Yasuoka's sideboard was enough to slow down the Dane in Game 4. A final Tarkir's command pumping the team and doing 3 damage directly to Yasuoka sealed the victory for Martin Dang.
So that was the top 8, but Standard was wide open. In a field of 408 players, no fewer than 14 different decks had at least 10 players.
Yeah, Rich, it's really unusual for us to come to an event like this and not have a deck that represents 22% of the field. Here, we had no deck that represented more than 11% of the field.
And within each archetype, there was lots of room for individual choices to reflect your own playstyle.
Sure, just look in the top 8. You had Adrian Sullivan playing a blue-black control deck that had no creatures in its main deck, relied on planeswalkers and board sweepers, whereas you had Shadow Yasuoka in the top 8 also playing a blue-black control deck, but he was playing like a Silumgar theme deck with plenty of dragons and dragon spells.
From the broad sweep of known archetypes through individual deck techs and the deck diary of Willie Adel, we had the tools to take you towards your next standard deck list.
I had a chance to talk with R&D member Ian Duke about the staples of Mono Red as well as the new toys for aggro players to work with. Ironically, 2 huge pieces of the Mono Red puzzle were green cards. A Tarkir's command allowed tournament champion Martin Dang's Hordling Outburst to hit twice as hard and close games out much more quickly. When that failed, he could make an unblocked goblin become immense, seemingly out of nowhere. Hordling Outburst found itself on the outside looking in when it came to the Jeskai Tokens deck, as played by Eric Froelich, who was vying for a top 8 berth in the final rounds of the event. With a glut of spells at 3 mana, Dragon Fodder filled the role of the dispatched Outburst. There were also plenty more tokens to be made at every spot along the mana curve, with the X-Spell Secure the Waste filling the void. Green-White Devotion was the dominant standard deck in the weekends before the release of Dragons of Tarkir. Ian Duke and I looked at some of the new face-down tools for the deck, including Death Mist Raptor, Den Protector, and even Inox Survivalist. While the deck was not played widely, it did carry Joey Manor to an 8-1-1 record in Standard, as he turned cards face-up for card advantage to grind his opponents out. Northern Ireland's Stephen Madden has been playing Green Devotion with the offbeat inclusion of Strength from the Fallen throughout its time in Standard. The deck made a huge leap forward in his mind with the printing of Den Protector, with cards like Satyr Wayfinder and Commune with the Gods letting him dig through his library to develop his board. The new Megamorph allowed him to return Strength from the Fallen for lethal attacks from his lowly satyrs. Germany's Patrick Dickmann rounded up a flight of the newest dragons in red, white, and blue, including Thunderbreak Regent, Icefall Regent, Dragonlord Ojutai, and even a Theros-era Stormbreath dragon. With so many dragons in hand and in play, Silumgar's Scorn was almost always a hard counter, as was Stubborn Denial. Anger of the Gods and Draconic Roar allowed him to clean up opposing creatures, while Anticipate and Dig Through Time gave him enough card selection to find whatever he needed, whenever he needed it. Pro Tour semifinalist Andre Stratsky played Green Devotion splashing red for the mighty Dragonlord Tarka. Not content to merely ramp into the dragon with Rattleclaw Mystic and other mana creatures, Stratsky was running a full 4 copies of See the Unwritten, which was capable of putting 2 creatures into play from the top 8 cards of his library. If those cards were Surak the Huntcaller and Dragonlord Tarka, that combo was capable of dealing 13 damage out of nowhere with the hasty Dragonlord. 4-time Pro Tour top 8 competitor Willie Adel shared his playtesting diary with us in the Tournament Center, as well as sharing his 3 rules for building a deck. He knew he wanted to beat aggro, beat the mirror, and play a deck he enjoyed to play. Adel has enjoyed playing Sidisi Reanimator since the Brood Tyrant was printed, and that was his starting point for this tournament. Along the way, he's tested out new additions like the Commands, Death Mist Raptor, and Dragonlord Tarka. He even toyed with a combo version that used Rally the Ancestors to kill his opponent in one shot with either Phoenix God of Deception or Grey Merchant of Asphodel. In the end, he did make room for the Red Dragonlord, Death Mist Raptor, and the newest version of Sidisi in his final deck list.
Alright BDM, let's talk about draft, and we had 2 mornings of draft action at the Pro Tour, 6 rounds, that's 2 sets of draft, 4 draft, all of that great stuff. What I want to know is, what did we learn about this new draft format?
Well, we learned that this is a different future than the one we saw in Khans of Tarkir. Khans of Tarkir was all about 3 color cards.
Sure.
Right? It was all about the clans. It was all about being Abzan. It was all about being Teamer. Whatever your 3 color set of cards was, that's what you were doing. And it really was a different drafting dynamic. It created different signals.
It's very complicated because you've got 3 of the 5 colors that you're trying to juggle all the time.
Absolutely. And it's really hard to know what your neighbors were. And your neighbor could be in 2 of your 3 colors, and you could still not be overlapping on the same cards. Right. It was very complex.
Abzan there, warriors here, and right. Things have changed a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. Dragons of Tarkir is much more straightforward. You have some very, very powerful allied colored dragons, but you also have a lot of single colored cards and a really, like, a return to the fundamentals of drafting. It's really about what cards am I passing here? What color signals am I sending to my left? And paying attention to the information that's coming from your right.
So if I open a nice big, let's just say it's a single color, a red dragon, something like that, am I wedded then to playing red at that point? Or is this a format where a lot of first picks are going to get discarded along the way as you understand what's going on upstream, as we call it?
I think you can. You certainly will see someone, maybe, let's just use an example of a 2-color dragon. Let's say you open a Dragon Lord or Tarka. Okay. And you're like, okay, red, green, but then you get past a very powerful, you get past a flatten. Okay. A very powerful black
rock solid red
rock solid, commonly drafted first pick black common, and you get past that one. Maybe you're going to abandon your first pick here. You're trying to win this draft. Maybe you're going to and you're going to be like, well, this person's clearly not black. I'll take the flatten. I'll see what happens. And you could be, there's some efficacy. There's some situations where you can be 3 colors, but honestly, you're really looking to be 2 colors and paying attention to the information going this way and coming from this way.
Okay, I think I get this. Pack 1 is about me here and over here on my right. Pack 2, still about me, but coming here from my left.
That's why it's so important to send clear signals in this direction, because it's really going to set up what color cards come back to you in Pack 2.
So it is lines of communication, not line. Okay, that's 2 packs. That's Dragons 1, Dragons 2. Talk to me about Pack 3, Fate Reforged, because this was a set that was designed to pivot. It was meant to belong with Khans of Tarkir, and then comes back now facing entirely differently with Dragons of Tarkir, but therefore playing differently, not just in card evaluation, but in the way it plays out in draft. There's a lot going on with this pack.
Absolutely, very different. When we were drafting Khans of Tarkir, we would open the Fate Reforged pack first, and there are just tremendous cycles of powerful rares in this. The dragons, the sieges, cards like Tassiger and Shu Yen, and just unbelievable cards that you would take and lock yourself in to those colors and never look back. And so it's really rare, if you'll pardon, to be past a bomb rare in Fate Reforged. But with 2 packs of Dragons of Tarkir to start, and to really get locked into a 2-color pair, it will happen that you will see someone get past an outpost siege, a citadel siege, because the person who opened it isn't white or red.
Some really interesting stuff, and from the very first pack that got opened on Friday morning, we wanted to make sure that you had the best information possible for your next draft. Let's explore some of the ways that you can get better with the pros. Jacob Wilson opened proceedings on Friday morning with Dragon Lord Ojutai and made sure that he stayed put in blue-white. At the same table, Hall of Famer William Jensen began with Arna Fencer Kintree Spirit. Now that's powerful, but it wasn't where Jensen, or the draft, wanted him to be. He told Marshall all about it at the video wall, and you can check out every pick from every player in our 2 featured draft viewers. On day 2, it was the turn of double world champion Shahar Shenhar and South Korean superstar Nam Sung-wook to be under the draft spotlight, with Pro Tour Gatecrash champion Tom Martell also dropping into the news desk to go over his day 2 draft picks. At the video wall, Hall of Famer Paula Vita Dama de Rosa gave us plenty to think about as he explored some of the tougher first picks coming out of Dragons of Tarkir booster packs. However, another Hall of Famer, Randy Buehler, showed us that in this format the second pick could be even more important than the first, as the viewing audience took part in So What Now? With a complete draft table to dissect, So What Now explores an often overlooked facet of the draft that can lead to match wins, or losses, down the road. Ivan Jaya of the United States got the ball rolling with a tricky choice between elusive Spellfist, backing up his blue opening Anticipate, or heading in another direction entirely with the rare Ataka's Command. Atsushi Nakamura's pick generated a lot of opposing viewpoints as discussion raged over staying on colour with Dromoka Warrior or branching out for Anticipate. For Matthew Little of New Zealand, his opening Thunderbreak Regent led the viewers to try to find the ideal colour match for red. So what now? Check out all our draft features from across the weekend. Now here on Friday Night Countdown, it's time for our milestone moment. And BDM, well, this time it's the championship victory of Martin Dang of Denmark, continuing the story of an incredible year for that Scandinavian nation.
Sure, it started with Lars Dam winning the Magic Online Championship. It continued with the Danish team winning the World Magic Cup on top of that amazing top deck Dune Blast, and now continues on with Martin Dang winning this Pro Tour. And it was really kind of special, actually, because Martin Dang, 15 years ago when he started playing Magic, he was going to PTQs every week with his good friend Lars Dam, and the two players dreamed of going to the Pro Tour together, playing and, you know, hoisting trophies and having this great time. And 15 years later, they're doing that. Lars was helping Martin play test overnight and was one of the first people to hoist him on his shoulders when he won this weekend.
The next stop for Martin Dang and Lars Dam will be the Magic Online Championship next month. And then Dang and Martin Müller will be at the World Championship at the end of August.
Yeah, it's really been an amazing year for Danish Magic.
And we're heading into a great stretch for Magic around the world. As well as the Magic Online Championship, we go to the Modern Masters 2015 weekend at the end of May, all around the world. And then, of course, we'll be back with Friday Night Countdown at our next Pro Tour, which is Pro Tour Magic Origins, coming to you from Vancouver at the end of July. But until we meet again on Friday Night Countdown from here at the Outpost Game Centre in Brussels, for Brian David Marshall, I'm your host Richard Hagan, saying bye.